Hi class, today we are going to write a program that reads in numbers from a file. Now the textbook has some source code in the chapter 5 that is just a straight text file, cells.txt, and it just contains a list of numbers. And we're going to be using that file as our sample file, our sample data for this program. So um, I've given you also the source code from chapter 5. The number is 5-23.cpp. I've loaded it in your template, and then we're first going to study it, and then we need to make some changes to it. And the changes are listed here in these bullet items. But first, let's look at the included code in the template window, and this once again is 5-23.cpp that comes from your source code, your textbook source code. All right, in this program we are, let me make it where you can see all of it. We are creating in line 13 an input file stream object called input file. And then in line 14 we're defining a regular integer variable called number. Now in line 17, notice we are opening the file called badlistofnumbers.txt. So what this attempts to do is open a file called badlistofnumbers.txt. This is case sensitive, and because there's no path listed here, that file has to be in the same folder as the CPP file. So if you're playing with this on Visual Studio, make sure that your text files reside in the same folder as the CPP files. Now let's look at what line 20 is doing. Notice that it's if, and then we have this input file. An input file is our input file stream object that we've defined up here. So input file actually has a value associated with it of true or false based on this open. So if we were able to open badlistofnumbers.txt, then this is actually going to return true. Input file has a true associated with it. Otherwise, it will return false. In other words, if we were unable to open the badlistofnumbers.txt file, then input file will be false. So if it's true, that means we open the file, and then we're going to attempt to read from that file into number. So just think of this as a CN, replacing a CN with input file, because remember, CN is an object. We always had to have our include IO stream in order to use CN. Well, here we're using our input file, our object, our input file stream object that we created up here. So we're reading into number. Numbers are integer variable. Now notice that this also is embedded as a test expression in our while loop. So this has the ability to return true or false. Now, if we're able to read a value in from input file, which remember this is going to be tied to badlistofnumbers.txt, then it will. It'll read in the number, and it does two things. It returns true as well. So if it returns true, then we know we have a number in the variable number, so we're going to output that number. Hit the close curly brace, which takes us back up to this while. And in the conditional expression here, we're reading in another, or we're attempting to read in another number from input file into the variable number. Now, as long as it's able to read in a number, remember this does two things. It actually reads in the number and it returns true. So it reads in the number, returns true, and then we output the number. This will happen until we are no longer able to read in a number. Well, in a text file, when you hit the end of file, or there's an end of file marker, input file won't be able to read in a number when it hits the input file marker, so this will return false. When this is false, we hit the close curly brace in line 27 and start executing the code that follows. So the very next thing here is the close. We're closing out all of the buffers associated with that input file stream object, input file. Okay, so now we have this else that's associated with the if. So we're going to skip that, right? Because if input file is true, we do what's inside these braces. Okay, so we're going to skip this, and then we're at the end and we return 0. So when this program runs, it goes through all of the data and reads in and then outputs all of the data in this bad list of numbers.txt. Okay, well, the actual program that we're working on says that we are going to be using the sales.txt file. So the very first change we need to make is to make this open sales.txt. Okay, so this needs to open sales.txt. Now, before I go in and start going through these bullet items and go into the coding window and giving you advice on where to make these modifications to the 5-23.cpp file, I want to open up Visual Studio and show you how this actually works. So in Visual Studio, I've copied and pasted the 5-23.cpp file from your template window. And notice it still has the bad list of numbers.txt file that it's attempting to open. Well, over here in my source files folder, I have the 5-23.cpp along with a text file. This text file, sales.txt, has the numbers in it that are actually out in your source code folder, the textbook source code folder. So I've added that here in the same folder as the 5-23.cpp. But I'm going to run this as is because I want to show you that this bad list of numbers.txt, what happens when I run this trying to open that is I get this error message that says error opening the file. So I'm going to go to the code and figure out where that's actually happening because I didn't go over that with you earlier. So remember I said that if it's able to open the file, then it does, and it associates it true with this input file object. But if it can't open the file, then there's a false associated with it. So if it can't open bad list of numbers.txt, then this will return false. Now, there is no bad list of numbers.txt. There's only a sales.txt over here, so that's why it was unable to open this file. So if this is false, it takes us to the else portion of this if, and that's where the error opening the file error message comes from. All right, well, we know how to fix this. Well, let's change this to sales.txt. And then let's rerun the program and let's see what happens. So here I'm getting my values that are in my sales.txt file output. So if you look, you'll see all of the sales.txt data in this window, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out and show you there's our sales.txt data. Remember, this program, all it does is read in a number and then output the number. And it does this until it hits the end of file. So that's how this program's working. This is the program that's in your template window. So now I'm going to take you back to your programming template window and look at the programming assignment first, and let's look at these bullet items. It says, write a program that will do the following with a file named sales.txt. The first bullet wants us to open the file, and if the file does not exist, give an error message. So if we look at the code, it's actually already in there. Here's the line where we try to open sales.txt. Now remember, there is a true or false associated with input file. So here, if it was unable to open sales.txt, input file will be false, which will take us to the else portion of the if and will output the error message, error opening the file. Now next it says, if the file exists, it reads the numbers from the file in a loop and calculates the following. It wants you to count the numbers in the file. It wants you to sum up all of the numbers. So you're going to need an accumulator with a running total. And then you're going to have to perform the average of the numbers that you read in. So before I talk about how we're going to solve this, let's actually look at the output. So if sales.txt has these values in it, which is the file from your source code, textbook source code, then you would output the number of elements. And here, this 5 is going to be the result of your program counting up using a counter and incrementing it every single time you read in a new number. Now you also have to have the sum of all the elements. So like we've done previously, remember we've created an accumulator and we initialized it to 0. A lot of times we call it total. And every time we read in a value, we add that value to our accumulator and replace what's in the accumulator with the sum. So something like total equals total plus number. That will, if that's inside a loop, it's going to accumulate all of the values that you've read in. Now this average, that has to happen after you've read in all your values, because you can't compute an average until you know everything that you want to average. So after you fall out of the loop, you're going to compute the average by using your total accumulator and dividing it by the counter, which is the value that I said you're going to have to keep up with, where you count each value as you read it in. In other words, you're just keeping a count. Every time you read in a value, you increment a counter. Okay, so then this next bullet item says when all of the numbers have been read in, it displays the count, the sum, and the average as shown below. That's this. That's what I just went over. Then it closes the file when all data has been processed. Well, that's actually written for you here. So a lot of this has been done. All you have to do is change what happens in here. You're going to need to, inside this loop, increment a counter, because if we get inside this loop, that means we read in a number, right? So we just need to increment a counter, and then we need to add number to a variable. So if I were you, up here where we are defining the integer number, variable number, I would also add a total variable and initialize it to 0, and a count variable and initialize it to 0. Because inside this loop, after you've read in the number here, you need to increment your counter and also add your number to the accumulator. This can go away. We are not outputting numbers in the body of this loop. We are just keeping a count of each number and adding the value of the number to an accumulator. Okay, so when we fall out of this loop, so this repeats until there's no more values to read in, right? When we fall out, we have read every number in the file. And so right here in line 28 is where you need to compute the average and output all necessary data. You will have in your total accumulator the sum of all of the values that you read in, and you will have in your counter variable the number of items you read in. So if you divide your total by your count, you will be able to compute the average. And then the last bullet item said you need to close the file. Well, that's already done for you. Okay, those are the changes you need to make to this program to make it work. So know that when you are reading in values, the sales.txt file is already here with the lab. Okay, and it does not have these same values in it. So you'll have to read from this file and then compute the correct results based on the numbers that are in this file. And then that's how you will earn your points for this program. Okay, that's all I have for now. Good luck with the assignment. And once again, if you ever need help, you know how to get a hold of me. Just send me an email and we'll get started troubleshooting your problem.